Welcome to Ingrid's World Television Show. My name is Ingrid Paris-Hicklin, and I am the host and executive producer of the television show. On this show, meet Karen Wallace, a veteran K through 12 teacher. She has 24 years of experience in the classroom. Karen Wallace earned her PhD and MPA in Public Policy Administration from Walden University and a Bachelor's of Arts degree in History from James Madison University. Dr. Wallace is responsible for writing the curriculum for the new African American history class, which was offered for the first time in school year 2021-22 school year. So welcome to the show, Dr. Karen Wallace. What a privilege it is to have you here on the show.
I'm happy to be here.
So tell our viewers about yourself. We touched on your education, but give us that wonderful picture about your education.
I have been teaching history since 1999. I began my career in DC Public Schools and started working in Manassas City Public Schools in 2000, and I've been at Osborne High School ever since. I have experience with all of the social studies curriculum from 9 to 12. I sit on several committees at the school division level, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, Human Resources Action Committee for diversity, and I also serve as equity liaison in my school.
Wow, amazing. What made you become an educator?
Well, I come from a family of educators. My mother taught for more than 4 decades. So you could say that it's in the blood, that it's something that I observed growing up. Also, I love history. I've always loved it since I was a little girl, and I've always liked it because of the stories. So I try to implement storytelling a lot in my classes.
Dr. Wallace, what brings you the greatest joy of being an educator?
What brings me the greatest joy is years later, when my students have graduated from high school, coming back and telling me how much they learned in my class and how they really enjoyed learning those stories. And then they'll share with their families and their friends. And still to this day, they'll tell me stories about, oh yeah, in your class, I learned this. And I had never learned that before.
Wow. You know, wonderful. This is wonderful. So tell us about being selected by the Library of Virginia, the Anne and Ryland Brown Teacher Enrichment Fund, as one of only 4 Brown Teaching Research Fellows.
I feel like it was a great honor, especially since I was representing my region in Virginia. So that was all of Northern Virginia and Orange County. And there were a lot of teachers that applied for this fellowship. So I was happy when I received the news that I had received it. And I enjoyed the opportunity to research over the summer.
Wow. So tell us about your tenure at the Library of Virginia.
During my tenure at the Library of Virginia, I had access to anything in terms of records in the state of Virginia. So maps, transcripts, freedom suits, just everything you could find. The art collection for the Commonwealth is located in the Library of Virginia. So anything that you can think of is housed there.
Unbelievable. So take us on the journey of your research project. How did you select your topic? First of all, I mean, it's an amazing topic, but tell us, how did you select your topic?
So I love storytelling. And I've noticed through my research for African American history for my classes that there's an absence of African American women during the antebellum period. All we hear about is slavery, but we don't talk about free Black women in their accomplishments and their lived experiences during this time.
I'm so happy that you did that type of research. So tell us what's the topic of your research?
The topic of my research was the lived experiences of freed Black women during the antebellum period in Virginia.
Wow. And then you talk about how they navigated, oh my goodness, the social status. They navigated their gender, their race, and social status. I mean, how many sources were involved in your research?
It is countless. I have so many resources that I found during my tenure at the library. So I have a flash drive, I have notebooks, I have so much, and I didn't even scratch the surface. There are so many things that you can still find on the Library of Virginia website. Some things that they're working on in African American narratives. So they're really trying to bring a voice to African American history and those narratives that have been forgotten.
Yes, but thanks to your research, Dr. Wallace, it's not going to be forgotten because you're bringing it now to the surface, and hopefully others will be inspired to investigate and start speaking about it. Any surprising discoveries you made?
Well, I did not realize that so many women owned land. Like, land was everything. If you owned land, then that was the way that you could make money. You could be stable. A lot of single women had to work on other plantations. But if you own the land, then you could kind of have people work for you. And another thing I found is that if you had a skill, having a skill was very important because you could use that skill to make money to support yourself and your family.
Wow. What motivates you to write about the past?
I love hearing about those stories that no one talks about. If you look at history, there are a lot of inconsistencies because history is written by the victors. We don't talk about the perspective of the people that quote unquote lost. So history is skewed. So it's always good to go back and look at those primary sources, those narratives, so you can understand how people lived and how they felt about how they lived.
Yesterday, you and I had the privilege of being in a meeting with you, and you started telling a story to us about one freed Black woman. Can you tell our viewers about one of the discoveries you made about this woman?
Yes, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, if you were freed, you had to leave the state within a year of being free. So this woman left the state and she was freed, and then her mother got sick. So she decided to return to Virginia. And once she was returned, then she was re-enslaved.
Wow.
But they gave her an opportunity to pick her owner. So she had to go out and solicit and find an owner. So she had to find a respectable man to vouch for her, saying that she was a good person and she could basically take care of herself.
Wow.
But you had to have a source or a gentleman, a good gentleman, say that you were good in order to prosper during that time.
Wow. So that means to say that she more than likely died in slavery?
Yes, and she was free because she had moved to Ohio, which was a free state.
Oh, really? And she had
Mhm.
moved to Ohio.
Mhm.
Oh, my goodness. So, what advice do you have for a person that's interested in pursuing a career as a? I know you're a teacher, but you're also to me like a historian. You know, what advice do you have for a person who's doing that?
To read as much as possible. I find a lot of stories from reading books. Um, I recently listened to a podcast, and there was a historical narrative that I'm going to share with my students. And it's something that I didn't know. So just continue to read and delve deeper than a history book. So look for those stories. And then when you hear a story, look even further to see what you find.
You know, I am also a lover of history, but I can't imagine how were you able to find um, the free Black women in the Virginian, library. It was almost like looking for a needle in a haystack to me. How did you find this?
So in the Library of Virginia, they have a database called Untold Narratives, and you can look up anything in there. So I uncovered freedom suits. So that's people that were suing for their freedom, emancipation deeds. Everything had to go through the General Assembly. So they had records of anything. And then I found all kinds of books in the library that pointed me in the direction of more women.
Wow. So actually everything goes through the General Assembly, and that's where who knew? I had no idea. That's fascinating. Oh my goodness. Um, is there where you are going with your research? What do you plan to do with your research and what you have found? What's the next step?
I think the next step may be to compile more research and possibly write a book, because those narratives are absent. We know about enslaved women and their experiences, especially the ones that could read or write, which is not a lot of women, but we don't know much about those stories. In Virginia, everything is told through the lens of white males. It's never told through the lens of Black women.
Oh, oh, I wish you continued success on that. That's amazing. So now, let me just go back to this. What are the roadblocks you have faced while pursuing your work?
Like you said, it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. So it took a lot of hours and looking at one document, then trying to find a story that led to another. So I would have to look at slave narratives and registries. And that was really difficult because sometimes the transcripts were there and you can actually read them. Sometimes you had to kind of like figure out what they were saying in the transcripts because they were so old. So that was another roadblock. And then just the fact that there weren't any sources really. I think I may have found 3 books that talked about African American women during this time period.
3 books?
Yes, 3 books specifically about Virginia.
Wow, wow. And what did they cover?
It talked about their professions. Um, there was a woman that I read about in Richmond who sued um, her neighbors because they had abused her. And so there was information about that in one of the books. And she ended up hiring lawyers because she was a woman of means, but then they didn't get her off. So she had to pay a fine and then she was whipped in public. So
Wow.
that also is in the records. So you can verify that.
Wow. Okay, heart-wrenching hearing this, and then loss and then whipped in public.
Yes.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, but it's a story, we grow from knowing.
Right.
And it's important. And I think it's also very important for women to know this, for all women to know it, because we share these struggles, and I'm hoping, there are these bridges that we become better people because we know our history. So what are the strategies? You've been very successful. I mean, my goodness, you have MPA, you have a PhD, you've been teaching for over 20 years. So you're very successful. So what are your strategies of being successful?
Well, for me, is always do something that you're passionate about. Because if you do something that you're really not passionate about, you won't put in the time or the work. So that's why I feel that, you know, that's why I research. That's why I continue to look for opportunities to present research, to become more educated so I can help students and become an advocate for them.
So you love what you're doing. I see. Has that been the key? And what has been the key to your success?
Leaving work at work.
Oh, uh-oh.
Because when I was a young teacher, I would bring home boxes and boxes of things to grade, and I had two young children. And my mother told me that sometimes you have to leave work at work and spend time with your family, and you need to reset. So that is why now I don't take home any work. So whatever I don't get done, it just is not done until the next day. That way I can have time to read and research and do things that I would like to do.
So you come home and you reset. That makes
Yes.
sense. That makes sense. Oh my goodness. How amazing is that? But my other question is, how do you stay motivated? I mean, because that's really, I mean, that's still teaching is a lot of work, and then doing the research too. How do you stay motivated?
I just know at the end of the day, I'm there for the kids and to help them understand history and to tell those stories that they're not hearing. And I'm also there to advocate for kids. So that is another reason why I'm at school. I try to make my students' lives better any way that I can. That is why I focus a lot on equity at school.
Ooh, it does. Did you come across any? I know you doing lots of research. Was there any story that like surprised you when you learned about a slave or a person who was freed? Any surprises with that? Did you come across a woman that really surprised you on her success, for instance?
There was a woman that was bequeathed 100 acres of land from her owner,
Wow.
and when he died. And so she took that land and she developed and she had a store and she would hire all these people to do work for her. And then she was able to pass down all that land and wealth to her daughters, which was unheard of because most freed women at the time, they worked on another plantation. They worked for someone else. They used their skills like as a seamstress or a domestic to make money because they're single women. It was hard as a single woman to do well. But if you're a single freed woman and you had land and you had a skill, then you didn't need to rely on a man. You didn't have to be married or have that man vouch for you um, when you got into trouble.
It sounds like there are some lessons learned from the past that can help us today. Oh
Yes.
my goodness. So, wow. Anything that you learned from that and then you said that you try to bring it to to what you do?
I learned that you should always keep fighting for what you believe in.
Mm.
So those women were strong. They just took care of themselves, they took care of their families, and that's the same with me. I'm a single mother, I have two children, and I was able to go to school, get my PhD, get my MPA, all while working and taking care of them and with Girl Scouts and anything else you can think of. And now my girls have graduated from high school and college, so I am currently working on a master's in reading so I can help students with literacy.
I think you're inspirational to me because you never stop learning. I think you're what I call a lifelong. Are you a lifelong learner?
Yes.
Sounds like that. I really does. Um, Before we go into like the Twitter and the Instagram, you talked a little bit about some of the things that you're doing for the state of Virginia and the different conferences that you spoke. Just touch on a little bit about some of the presentations you have done.
Well, I'm getting ready to do a presentation on learning loss. The COVID year was a hard year for students, and they're still behind on a lot of foundational skills, and it's adversely affecting children of color, especially indigenous, um, Hispanics, Blacks, and any other marginalized communities. I've spoken about diversity, equity, inclusion policies, critical race theory, and how it has been taught in a way that it was not intended.
Ooh, ooh, oh my goodness, powerful. So, how can we follow your work on Twitter and Instagram? How can we follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Doc K Wally and on Instagram, Dr. Karen Wallace.
Wow, that's beautiful. So, there's two things I want to your words of inspiration to people who are watching it. So, you have people, let's say, they're out there and the adult out there. What's your word of inspiration for people like myself?
to to never stop learning. Like become
Mm.
that lifelong long learner. Everyone can learn something new. You just have to take that opportunity.
Become a lifelong learner. Oh my goodness. And what do you say for our young people out there who are, yeah, what's your words of inspiration to them?
To never give up because a lot of children are facing adversity for a whole bunch of different reasons. And just keep focused and don't let negativity guide you. Always be
Mm.
positive about the next thing that's coming up in your life.
I mean, when you just, you recounting the story about how the woman, the free black woman, received 100 acres and then passed it on through the family, the value of land, it just was like, oh my goodness, how powerful is that? And then the whole idea that we should always be learning and inspiring the next generation. You're pretty amazing. Well, I just can't thank you enough for being on the show, Dr. Wallace, because you're inspiring many people here. You're inspiring me, makes me want to find those three books that you're talking about. Because, I mean, my goodness, although I would have to say, you got to be pretty strong to read it because I don't know about you, but it makes me become teary. I just kind of, let's say, this is what our people went through.
Yeah, I had to go on a lot of walks while I was in the library because it was easy to get upset when you're reading all these different stories. And it wasn't just about the free Black women, just about how women in general were treated in that time period.
Women in general. Oh my goodness. Well, I hope this show will, again, Dr. Walls, thank you for being on the show. And I hope this show will inspire many to investigate their history. I mean, there is so much to learn. My inspirational quote this time is from Dr. Henry Louis Gates. The thing about Black history is that the truth is so much more complex than anything you could make up. Thank you for watching the television show. Connect with me on Facebook at Ingrid's World and follow the show at Ingrid World VA on Twitter and Instagram. Never miss an episode because the show is on Ingrid's World LLC YouTube channel or ingridsworld.org. So I so appreciate your support and thanks for watching.